Best thing about open lines is I never know where you're going to go. Let's find out. Dan is in Wisconsin on Coast to Coast. Dan?
Hey, Ian. Thank you much.
Yeah.
First off, I'd really like to say it's a privilege and an honor to be heard by the Coast to Coast listeners, researchers. I call these people at night researchers because the people in the daytime are just sleepwalking, listening to the mockingbird media falsities. But the researchers up at night, they're the people that are actually awoke.
Well, I want to make a point on that. I wish more people did original research. And just going online and reading stuff, that's not really research. So I'm with you, and I think that that's a cool thing about a lot of these coast-to-coast authors and what a lot of our listeners do is they go out and they find something. They don't just repeat what they've read. They go out and they find something. They go and do in their own investigations. They go to places. That's what I really admire. But go ahead, Dan.
That's exactly the point, to inspire, to do research.
Yeah.
If you want to know more, do the research.
Right. But don't just sit in your gaming chair, and come back and go, I read this thing. It's like, yeah, okay, fine, but that's not really research. But so where do you want to take us, Dan?
Well, I heard you talking about the late Phil Schneider, and I've seen all of his videos, but I was even in contact with Dr. Fred Bell in the late 90s. He had written a book on medicine, alternative health care,
Right.
But he was being interviewed by Jesse Ventura on his TV show, and I don't know if it was then, but he mentioned that Phil Schneider was actually taken out because it wasn't what he was saying publicly. It was when he got very drunk and inebriated, the things he was shedding about what was going on underground and things like that. And then Dr. Fred Bell, I think he wanted to stick around and talk to Jesse Ventura about some things on the moon because he was telling him he was also a CIA agent. And Jesse Ventura says, well, of course, with all the knowledge you have, And Dr. Fred Bell, I hope you all know who he is, but he's the son or a great-grandson of the Bell, the guy that made the phone. So Dr. Fred Bell, he was working with the government, and he saw on the satellite monitors that what they were called fast walkers, these alien spacecrafts. So Dr. Fred Bell was very much in the know on many things and was trying to communicate with these antennas that he made out of sacred geometry, pyramids, and so forth. He was kind of like the pyramid guy. And David Wilcox, interestingly enough, he was the one who discovered this L-tannin antenna. That's L-T-A-N-I-N antenna. And then this guy, he developed the math to follow how these fast walkers were coming into our space, our cosmic part, and that math was a breakthrough to the military and so forth. So I encourage the listeners, the researchers, to look into the L-tannin antenna. And if you could find the paper that David Wilcox wrote, you'll have a good first base to do the research on that. But Dr. Fred Bell, he was also, we call it suicided. They said he died of natural causes. But unfortunately, like the alternative health people who want to tell us about what's in things, they kind of disappear as well. But we got to stay awake.
Are you alleging that who is it that you're alleging kills them?
Yes, only
no. Who is it? Who's the they? I'm just always curious. Who's the they, as opposed to the, he committed suicide.
Yeah. Well, they're the ones that put their finger to the lips and say it's a secret. They all belong to the secret societies that we're not a member of.
Okay.
And they have to take an oath, as Bill Cooper told us. If you have to take an oath to join any clique, any club, any religion, it's not a religion, it's a cult. Stay away from it. And these people all belong to a cult, and they all send their money, dollars go to Lucifer. It's all to support Lucifer.
All right, we'll leave that there. Thank you. John is on the international line in Newfoundland on Coast to Coast. John? Yeah.
Hi, Ian.
Hey, Newfie.
Hi. Good to talk to you. I'd like to talk about what I think are the real causes behind the Havana syndrome. Just before I do, want to mention
that's
last
so
year
interesting.
Biden.
Go ahead.
Last year, the Biden administration, they released a report into the final research on the Havana syndrome. And one of the things they said in the report is that radio waves could have caused the symptoms of the Havana syndrome, and some of those symptoms are extremely serious, anything from headaches to brain damage.
Sure.
The reason I think it's one thing is they don't actually say what they think the cause is, and I think the reason they're not saying what the cause is because they don't want to offend large telecommunications companies. Because if people suspected that cell phone towers may be hacked, then that would be bad for business for them. But the reason I think it's cell towers is, well, I've done the research. Cell towers can be hacked. There's no doubt about that. And the reason I think that they are being hacked by at least one person, it's a person that I know very well. It's a person who is an IT expert, and basically I started getting some of the very same symptoms, especially severe headaches, that the Havana syndrome people got. I started getting that at the end of 2020, December 31st. And then I would get them on a regular basis, at least a few times a month in the last couple of years. Last year and this year, it's been almost every day. And the reason I think it's this person is because this person knows that I'm one of the 4% of the population who is extra sensitive or hypersensitive to electromagnetic radiation, such as the type that radio waves emit, cell towers or any radio waves. So he knows that, and I believe that he started doing that on December 31st, 2020, which was basically 1 year after we had a major argument. And before that, about 6 months before that, I believe he started hacking the radio towers, at least the local radio tower in Newfoundland, where I was at the time. I still am, and that was one broadcasting out of the town of Bonavista, Newfoundland, which is a couple of hours north of St. John's, Newfoundland. And I've been listening to radio all my life, for many, many decades, and I never heard those types of problems before on the radio. Not just dead air, sometimes over an hour of dead air, but also high-pitched frequencies and tones, which I recorded. And and so then I believe he started doing that in the summertime.
Okay, hang on. You're kind of kitchen sicking me here with a lot of things. So you believe that your friend or the guy you knew is behind this because of an argument that you had?
Well, he hacked my devices for years before, like my cell phone and my computers. For example, if he and I had an argument on the phone or even a small disagreement the next day, usually what would happen within 24 hours when I would turn my cell phone on, it would turn on and off 4 or 5 times in a row. During those periods, I didn't even have control over 911. If I needed to call 911, I wouldn't have been able to, right? And also, he's into numerology, so lots of times I get these severe headaches. It happens at particular times of the day, reflecting numbers that I know are significant to him. For example, his birthday or my birthday or an address where we used to live at before. That type of thing. So you see, he's into numerology, and a lot of these headaches happen at that time. And even the radio problems on the AM radio, they would happen usually at specific times. Again, reflecting numbers that I know are significant to him.
Now, how is it that you all are friends?
Okay, he's my brother, my one and only brother.
There you go. It was a little suspicious when your history and then everything. So you think your brother? You think your brother is doing this?
While we're on that note, Ian, can I just please mention I have a non-profit YouTube channel that I put up with all kinds of extra information about this, and that's called I Suspect My IT Pro Bro. Part 15, that video, IT is capital I and capital T. Everything else can be lowercase. I'll just repeat it one more time. It's I Suspect My IT Pro Bro, Part 15.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Appreciate that. Let me get to Jamie and Maui on Coast to Coast AM. Jamie?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Wow, awesome. Cool. I've tried to call plenty of times, but it's great to get through. I'm not here to try to hawk my website or nothing either, or my YouTube channel. I just had a question out of the box. I listened to you talk to a lot of people, and I really like it. I listen to you every time. 5 days a week. I drive home. I just had a question for both of you. Kind of obscure, but I was just wondering what your guys' take is on these sayings that like we have as like a, maybe it's just in the United States or all over the world, but like time is of the essence, or takes one to know one, or like dreams do come true. Like, is that, I've never heard that quoted by anybody, but I've heard it said by plenty of people and never been able to pinpoint somebody who's actually said that in any time frame. Is that just like programmed into us to like identify with other human beings?
It's a cliche, right?
It's a cliche, right? It's just like,
we use cliche. Yeah, we use cliche in our speech all the time as sort of shorthand, kind of like code. I think actually, if you really look at it, there's an origin for almost all these things. A lot of our most common expressions go back to Shakespeare, or the Bible. It's like the Shakespeare or the Bible, and those end up being the source code, if you will, for a lot of our cliches. Does that help?
Cliche is a good word, because I feel like I run into a lot of people. I mean, especially on Maui. I mean, it's a really transient place, but
right.
For me, I just feel like so many people want to be short with you nowadays instead of like really talking to you about their issues, and they want to push their issues, but they want you to ask them about it. And
right.
Like, I'm all about listening. I want to listen to everything you have to say, but I shouldn't have to ask you. And I feel like these are the type of questions. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Let me tell you something. Before you even go any further, I agree. I teach writing at a university level, and I try to get cliches. We all use them. I recognize that to a degree, but I try to get students to stop talking in that kind of coded speak. And when it comes time to actually write an essay, I'll tell them right up front, I'll deduct a point for every cliche you use, because that's just habitual, right? You don't even know what it means, right?
Right.
You don't have any.
Say it because you want to say it.
Well, and you've heard somebody else say it, and they sounded smart saying it, but you don't actually know what it means, and it's weird to me, because I think a lot of it have to do with the farm. And people don't grow up on farms anymore. They don't know.
No, yeah, right.
You know, if you say chicken running around with the chicken with their head cut off, there was a time when actually you knew what that meant. You saw that.
Right.
Now,
yeah, I agree.
Right.
Totally. And I'm only 34 years old, but my roots are in the Midwest in Minnesota, and I moved out here, and it's weird to see like the drop in knowledge that people want to contain.
Right. So let's use, we're in Minnesota, by the way.
Like south of the cities, Hastings area, Red Wing, Rochester.
Yeah. Been there a lot. Nice. Loved Hastings. Red Wing's, that's a beautiful little city, Red Wing.
Right on. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, it really is. I love that. I mean, you get on the other side of the river, the so-called God's country isn't that far away. But, I mean, look at all the bald eagles that come in and roost. And, it's really cool. So, but I think that's what we do. I think especially with the nationalization of media and the Internet, and with people who speak in shorthand on digital media and cell phone messages, they're pretty happy with these meaningless expressions they're expressions that have meaning. They just don't happen to know what they actually mean, and so they repeat them. But if you said, what does broken record actually mean? Have you ever heard a broken record? Well, no.
No. Yeah.
Right. Nope. So it's like, how do you know it sounds like a broken record? If you've never played a record, you couldn't spindle a 45 right now if I paid you $10. So,
I
right?
I don't even have the $10.
Right. But that's what I'm talking about. It's like you can't. That's where cliches come into it. It's a nice, easy way to speak. I don't know if it gets any more nefarious than that. But by the way, I think that, like, if you go back to the 17th century, that's where a lot of our expressions started, when English was really being formalized, and it was processing, and moving to cities. So there you go. That's what it takes one to know one. I don't know where it's from, but I'm willing to bet you it's in the 1700s or 1600s for that matter sometimes. So, all right, well, let me see if I can get one more person in before the bottom of the hour on Coast to Coast AM, and then we're into our last half hour of open lines. I really like that call. That was really interesting. Mike is in Greenport, New York on Coast to Coast. Mike?
Yes, I heard two stories from Mark Bell about reptilians. One of them was a lady used to call in and call herself the intergalactic diva, and she said one day she woke up having sex with a guy, and Art Bell said, did you say excuse me? And she said, well, it felt good, so I went with it, but then it started getting rough. And Art Bell said, what do you mean it started getting rough? She goes, I opened my eyes, and the guy turned into a reptilian. And then the other story had to do with Red Elk, Indian medicine man.
I remember him.
And,
yeah,
I had him on a lot. And
I had him on once or twice. He was
had no bottom, and he some people called in and said they had one on their property, and people used to throw refrigerators and stoves down them, and they never heard it land. And Red Elk said once in a while reptilians come up out of these holes. And Art Bell said, I've heard ladies tell me that they have sex with these. Have you ever heard of that? And Red Elk said, oh, many times. And Art Bell said, I was afraid you were going to say that.
Or he hoped he was going to say that. It's funny, that makes me so happy, Mike, in its own weird way, because that really is how Art talked. And I didn't have a lot of private conversations with him, but I certainly listened to him enough. And he created a culture where, that kind of jocularity was so perfectly Art. And no, he was being devilish. He was just trying to get her to say something she didn't want to say, or he was hoping she would say. All right, last half hour. Here come the numbers. Stand by next on Coast to Coast AM. This is Ian Punnett. We're Coast to Coast with your open line calls. Harrison is in Dallas on Coast to Coast. Go ahead, Harrison.
Yes, I am, sir. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Awesome. Ian, I've been a fan for years of yours, and especially Coast to Coast area. And I hope I'm not dragging you on the fence, but I'm sorry. I've got to have this question answered. So many of your guests are on the borderline. It seems every night that, okay, let's say astronomy in the Bible, which the prophets actually seen and took heed of. But now we've gotten into astrology. I would just love to hear you expand on that, sir. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thanks for the kind words. I mean, look, it all comes down to definitions, right? And I would differ on your definition of that the people in the Bible were astrologers. The wise men were much closer to much closer to astrologers than astronomers. I have to keep those separate. That numerology and chants and reading the stars, that was not far from the worldview, from the cosmology of the science of the Bible. This notion of something more exacting, something more scientific like astrology, we gotta jump ahead a century or two or 16. Right? I mean, we don't get until Galileo, maybe Copernicus. I mean, there is, and okay, sure, the pyramids, that was some interesting work being done in what we might call today like the foundational work of astronomy. But I don't think it's the progression that you think it is. In fact, it's really interesting. Have anybody ever looked up drawing lots? You say, yeah, they drew lots. That's just a game of chance. And the disciples and in the Christian part of the Bible and all throughout that era, the idea that chance was decided by God. So it wasn't in conflict with God. If you drew lots, you were divining what God wanted people to do. Now we look at it differently. I don't know if that helps, but I always find that interesting, and it tests my view too, because I think, well, gosh, that seems so cheesy. But then when you actually get into it, the reason why the three wise men came was they were following the stars, which they were following astrology, not astronomy. Patrick is east of the Rockies in Syracuse on Coast to Coast AM. Patrick?
Yeah, I'm here.
What happened with Syracuse and Boston today?
Hey, listen, we got to have our quarterback out. Listen, our time is limited, right? So I'm about to tell you some things as quick as I can, as fast as I can, before you guys are going to have mind blown.
Okay, well, you got to be... Okay, go ahead.
Quick. So, all started a few years back when Buddy used to always see the drones. Always see the drones. I say, you're crazy, you're crazy.
Right.
Out on the boat with him, on the river. Holy crap, that ain't no star, right? That quick, so that my mind's open, I'm open my mind. So as it goes on, brother-in-law, a year later or so, I'm very religious, committed suicide, 6 years old, look up to him, blacked out drunk.
No.
So I fought with God, for a couple of days drinking, said, he's in heaven, God, it's my brother. And after the 2 days of drinking, the one day I'm sober, I walk out of my house outside the river, and I see two angels bringing him to heaven, and I'm in awe. In awe. My eyes are watering. I talked to my priest about it. He's like, aren't they beautiful? I'm like, oh, my God, somebody else seen them.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right? Here I am like, yay! And he tells me to speak his word. That's what I got to do. So anyways, and moving on, so I'm opening my mind more and more, and I'm seeing lost souls. And I'm like, oh, my gosh, it's the demons, the angels. It's a fight for the whole neighborhood. Everybody in the neighborhood's like, come on, everybody have faith. I'm like, holy crap, there's so much more out there, People don't open their minds. That simple, you know what I mean? That simple. God will say, I talk about God, they're like, oh, you're crazy. You know what? God tells you your mind ain't open. Get it together, That simple. So on to that, the aliens, this is all along. The drones are not all government. They're aliens, and I've had, the boomerang thing they've seen in Arizona, 10,000 people. I've seen it a few times. You see it when you don't look. Every time you want to look, you're never going to see it. So that, and now the other day, I see the boomerang for the first time. I'm telling a friend, neighbor who opened his eye, come on outside. And it's messing with me. And he comes outside. I'm like, dude, it's gone. He's like, all right. And he goes, forget about that. What's that? And I look up in the sky. It looked like a dragon with a string of stars. Like not even the dragon, but just the way it floated through the sky. Someone said to me, it could be drones. That's how they drop them off, in like a string. And it was just, my buddy tries to film it. And his screen is black. Black.
Okay.
And I go to film it, and it won't even let me put my phone on video.
Well, I don't. It's hard. It's hard to tell about that because of the distances and everything. But really interesting, and I'm really interested in the response of your priest too. So I'll let your experience stand on its own for you. I do want to, you did, by bringing that up, you did harken back to another caller who was talking about who was wondering whether something was an angel or a ghost. And the two have nothing to do with each other. It's like, might as well be talking about a pony and a pogo stick. But I do think that those are interesting experiences. And I understand. I think you should write them down, too. Pass them along for generations. If you saw them, you believed it, you talked to somebody else, they endorsed it. Works for me. West of the Rockies, Jake is in Vegas on Coast to Coast.
Yes, Ian.
Hey.
Jake.
That's you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're playing the part of Jake tonight is Jake. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Punnett. I just, I'm an older gentleman, and I know what a broken record sounds like.
Right.
Yeah. In fact, I still play them.
Yeah, you clean them as best you can. You try and get all the gunk out of there, and they still skip and they still stay sometimes. Yeah.
Well, sometimes I like to pop and hiss.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole, I don't know if you know about this, but on Sirius XM, there's a channel, a vinyl-only channel, and they only play records on vinyl.
Oh, wow. That sounds interesting. I have to play my own vinyl here.
I get that. And, there are a lot of reissues of classic vinyl albums because people have worn them out, and now that vinyl's back in again, people want a fresh, real copy of Dark Side of the Moon, or they want it of, Thelonious Monk or something. So, yeah, happens.
Well, there's used record stores. Once in a while, you can get a good bargain at those.
That's true.
Pull it out and find out that whoever bought it didn't play it much. That's always nice.
Right. Yeah, I agree. But it still has, like some albums, it still had the plastic sleeve on the inside, and it's it's pristine. It's awesome.
I last called a radio show, probably must have been early 70s, 70, 71, and I called Al Jasbo Collins.
I remember Al Collins in Colorado?
Well, he was here on the West Coast.
Okay.
I guess he got around, as far as I can tell. He was the one who had a purple grotto, and you'd call in, and he would majuberize you.
I know. Different guy then, yeah.
Yeah, recite the... I ain't got to show you no stinking badges flying.
Right.
Sierra Madre.
Yeah, it's funny. I had never heard of this guy. So I'll have to go back and look at him because I find old jock stories and, the successful local disc jockey who stayed in the business a long time became, a lot of those people are almost totally forgotten. Like I'm reading here just in the wiki page, it says that Jasbo Collins occasionally hosted The Tonight Show in 1957. Okay, that's cool. Didn't know that.
Yeah, that's the old Steve Allen days.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing, so thank you. I appreciate the heads up on that. Jake, let me get to Alan in Katy, Texas, on Coast to Coast. Alan?
Oh, man. I was just about to pee. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it would probably be inappropriate to do that on the air. There's probably no FCC regulation against it, but I would appreciate it.
Sorry about that. I'm on open book here, but
I totally get it.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I was just listening, and I realized, this is rare. I hear this voice every now and then, and I was like, this is weekly, right? This isn't every day that I hear you. You're a weekly show, right?
Who, me? Yeah, I come in about 2 or 3 times a month. Yeah.
Okay.
The show's 7 nights a week, but I get to jump on.
I get it on it anyway. I don't want to waste my time here, just rambling here. I got that problem.
Yeah, you got to pee on top of that.
Yeah, yeah, that's the problem. I should have done that before. So, the guideline. There's no parameters, right? I hear people talking. They're all over the place talking about just interesting things. There's not like one topic that I should stay on. Correct?
No, you get to go anywhere you want.
Okay. Yeah, the nice lady was asking. So I wanted to just kind of bring awareness to something that is going to be a problem in the future for people. certain individuals, and I think it's a problem that no one's talking about it enough, but it is public information. But it's nanorobotics.
Yeah.
I don't know if have you heard of that before?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to sound like a crazy person, but I don't think that this should be unacknowledged, and I think it should actually go to Congress. There is a gang here in Katy, Texas. I've been gang stalked for the last 7 years, and they've been harassing me and threatening me every day in little discreet ways where I go places in public, and it would be something they say indirectly for me to hear or something they would wear. Right. But something that's been happening to me is what I caught on video would explain what I saw in person 3 times. So they have weaponized this gang, whoever the hell they are, nanorobotics. And it blends into its surroundings like the way an octopus or like a cuttlefish. I don't know if you're aware. Yeah, you obviously know about that.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I'm going to sound like a crazy person by talking about this, but this stuff is now like a terrorist act.
Well, it's funny. I'm curious where this gang got nanorobotics. I mean, that's a fairly advanced field. And one which is very specialized, but I'll keep an eye on that story. We talk a lot about AI, but I think nanorobots could present all sorts of different complications that people are should be looking out for. So, all right, we got that out. Go P. Let me go to Perry, first-time caller line in St. Louis on Coast to Coast. Perry?
Yes. How you doing?
Got to be quick.
Okay, so the Chain of Rocks Bridge, as I was a teenager and even younger, I can remember every time it rained or iced, there was always a wreck on that bridge, and because it had a kink in the middle, because they started from both sides. It went into Illinois and to Missouri.
Right.
And when we got up there on it, as it was closed, and it was like a fairyland because the vines all grew up on it. There was so many big dents and stuff from the big old cars and stuff hitting it. Well, I was just wondering if anybody else had any stories about wrecks on it, because I can remember as a kid always hearing, "Oh, there's a wreck on the Chain of Rocks Bridge," whenever it was iced or something, to where I believed it was haunted because that's where that guy threw the 2 girls off of.
Well, you could be right. Time wise, I don't know that we'll have time to get a response.
What I'm talking about, the 2 girls that got thrown off of it.
Yeah, sadly enough, I think that's happened enough that I don't know that I can pinpoint that, but I'll go look it up afterward, as I often do. I have a little running list. And that leaves me with time enough for Chip in Texas on Coast to Coast, because he's been waiting a while. Chip?
Hey, Ian. How are you?
Good. Take us where you're going to take us so we can all go home.
Yeah. The energy that is produced within this is produced by our brain, the synapses, as it works, enzymes conduct an energy. As we know, energy never dies. So I call that our soul.
Okay.
Spirit.
Well, even theologians disagree on the difference between a spirit and a soul, but okay.
Yeah, they do.
I'll go along with that.
And it's what kept us divided among most of the human beings. If we all realize that everything we see, hear, taste, and touch is told whether we like it or not by our brain and the energy it produces.
Well, what we know for sure is everybody has a soul, but not everybody's got soul.
Yeah, this is true. Like your Earth, Wind, and Fire pick earlier.
Yeah, exactly. That made me very happy that you caught on to that.
Yeah. Well, I'm old enough to remember when it was a fresh release.
Oh, man, they're great.
Yeah, but the Dead South he played also. I really like him.
Oh, Dead South's excellent. You gotta go. You gotta go do a deep dive on Dead South. You could start with that song. In Hell, there's plenty of company. I think it's what it's called. All right, so that'll do it for tonight. But tomorrow night, I get to be back on Coast to Coast AM. First hour is Robert Young Pelton, who's been everywhere, and he's going to give us kind of his own perspective on some of these conflicts because he's been on both sides. He's talked to these people. He knows a lot. And then our main guest will be about food, religions, cults, That's tomorrow night on Coast to Coast AM. In the meantime, thank you, everybody. That was a fun night. Deus te mat. I do, too.